The purpose of a speaker's introduction is to make them look good in front of a room full of new friends. But in my introduction, I always make sure to include corny, not as funny as he thinks he is, and not Kevin Hart. Why? Because that's feedback that I've gotten for previous presentations. And of course, I used to resist that kind of feedback. I'm a human being. Whenever I would get feedback like that, I'd get resistant, I'd get resentful, I'd get stressed. But you know what I didn't get? Paid. Yeah, I didn't want to hear it from anybody. I know what I'm talking about. I don't need to listen to you. I've watched The Secret, and I've manifested $9,000 over 6 years. That's a depressing vision board. So it was obvious I had to change, but that's the world that we're living in today. Change is scary. But the irony is that it's a bigger risk to maintain the status quo in a changing world than it is to change in a status quo world. Now, HR had a huge opportunity to innovate itself, to reinvent itself at the beginning of this pandemic. Unfortunately, so many more things have been thrust onto your plates that organizations have forced human resources into doubling down on compliance, leaving little energy to get creative. I mean, at this point, you probably know so much about healthcare that I bet when you're on a plane, you raise your hand when someone yells, "Is there a doctor in the house?" Now, here we are. The Great Resignation. The war for talent. The that would to HR. The voluntary quit rate isn't going down. It's the highest it's been in decades. Month after month after month. We can't fill positions. We can't keep the people we have. What do we do? If we had spent the last 20 plus years addressing disengagement and treating our people like, well, people, actual human beings with lives and families and passions and personal goals, this would be a way different presentation. This would be something more along the lines of what to do when everyone in your company is happy, or how to handle all the people who are knocking down your door to work for you. But instead, look at the topics most HR conference presentations cover. They're essentially how to avoid lawsuits. Brenda refuses to work with Kevin. Now what? Or somebody came to work drunk again. Looking back through our history, most companies have been so focused on building up the bottom line that they put culture on the back burner. Oh, we don't have time for culture. I hate to break it to you. You don't have time to not have time anymore. But so many organizations are doing the bare minimum to make time. And it's impossible to build a strong culture of any kind if you're maintaining the perspective that it's either one or the other, bottom line or culture. I mean, how much do you think, just estimate, how much of your company's energy would you guess that they put into building the bottom line versus building the culture? Is it 90-10 bottom line to culture? Is it 75-25? Is it 50-50? Think of it this way. If you ask a happy married couple how much effort each of them gives to the relationship, do they say 50-50? No, they say 100-100. The same should be true of building your bottom line while building your culture. Now, some of these organizations out here aren't even trying to adjust to the times. They're doing the same thing that got us here in the first place. How about a raise? You can wear jeans once a week. They're working from home. They're probably not even wearing pants. How about a cocktail cart? You can drink at work. I had a buddy of mine that I hadn't seen in a while. We were catching up, and I asked him if he liked his job, and he goes, well, they let us drink after 3. Didn't answer my question. Do you like your job? And he goes, why do you think they let us drink? So, yeah, pay raises and casual Fridays and cocktail carts, those are nice, and you should definitely look into leveraging those things. But the reality is, anybody can offer those things. Giving them stuff, that's the old paradigm. And it was always just a temporary answer to quiet people down. How many of you have seen employees get an offer, and then you offer more, and then they stay, only to be out the door within a year or two anyway? See, that's a sign that it's not just money that's keeping them employed at your organization. I mean, it would be nice if money were the answer, and then we could fill those positions, get back to work, and just offer more money when people get antsy. Now, when I have one-on-one consulting calls with CHROs and hiring managers, it's the same refrain over and over again. I'm offering sign-on bonuses. I'm offering performance incentives and higher pay, but just seems like nobody wants to work. Here's the hard truth that I want to tell them, but they eventually figure it out themselves anyway. It's not that no one wants to work, it's that no one wants to work for you. So grab that Windex, spray down that mirror, wipe it down, and take a good hard look at yourself and what you can do differently. Honestly, I wasn't even planning on doing this, but it was just right here. So sure, the recruiting and retention thing might have been foisted upon you through no fault of your own, and that's fine. But the sooner you start asking yourself, what can I do differently starting now? That's the second you get to work trying to find ways that inspire people to come and work for you. And I'm going to be totally honest, I'm not a recruiting expert. I'm not going to show you how to use Indeed or Glassdoor or what sort of competitive benefits or 401k match or signing bonuses are most effective, because anyone can offer those things. Today, I want to help you shift from the old thinking paradigm and meet employees where they are and connect with them there. I want to challenge you to focus in on what makes your company, what makes your people, and what makes your culture. Because culture is the reason why employees are leaving in droves. Now take a look at this CHRA survey from February of last year. And I think this is really interesting, and it's very indicative of where most workplaces' mindsets are. Now they're making the argument that money is the main reason most people are considering changing their jobs. Again, focusing on that quick fix. But the graph, it's a little bit misleading. I mean, they even color better compensation and corporate benefits in a bright red orange, so your eyes are drawn to that as the reason why people are changing jobs. But let's take a closer look. See here, 25% want better work-life balance. That's culture. 16% want to be recognized for their work. That's culture. 8% want a better culture. That explains itself. 5% want value alignment. That's culture. 5% don't have a strong relationship with their coworkers. That is also culture. And 5% don't know. Could be anything. Could be burnout or fear their bosses are going to discover that they're actually taking this survey in the first place, or might even just be the general vibes at work and they can't quite put a finger on what feels off. But again, that's culture. So 64% of people are considering changing their jobs because of culture. Now, the Gallup State of the American Workplace has found over 20 years running that only 1 in 3 American employees is engaged by their work, which means 2 out of 3 are disengaged. And that sits us at around 66%, which that is ironically very close to the 64% number. And that's not what people want to hear, is it? I mean, building a culture where people want to be, it's hard work. But if we really want to attract and engage and retain the best people who want to be there, culture has to be a daily focus while you're still focusing on the day-to-day tasks of work. It can't be a box you check. It's like if I were to put hang out with my girlfriend on my to-do list and then checked it off when we went to bed. And she saw that, I'm sleeping on the couch that night. What is culture? Write down your definition of culture. The first thing that comes to mind. What is the first thing that you think of when you think of culture? Can you succinctly define what culture is? Can you succinctly define what your culture is? And can you even say succinctly? For a word that means simple and to the point, it's not very simple and to the point. Somebody should look into changing that. But I digress. I like to think of culture as more of an adverb, or the how, rather than a noun. Culture is how the people in an organization treat one another. So your company can have its mission and your vision and your values, but those are all nouns for the most part. If you were to show people this wall in your office, it wouldn't mean anything to them. But if innovation, teamwork, and integrity If those were actions and adverbs, well, complete strangers would get a sense for what it's like to be part of your team. How your people behave to achieve your company's mission, create the vision, and uphold the values is evident in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment interaction, especially when it hits the fan. Those are the interactions that build culture. So take a moment after this video is over and really redefine what those values are. I'm assuming you want to attract the best people. So then you've got to think of your culture like dating. And I know that's a little taboo when it comes to HR, but stick with me here. Right? Because anybody can buy you an expensive dinner on a first date. They can send you on a trip to the Caribbean, or they can even offer you a dental plan on your first date. That's romantic. But what's going to keep you? It's the quality of the experience. It's how they engage with you. Are you looking forward to seeing them again? Are they the only thing you're thinking about because you can't wait to be with them again? Or are you on the phone swiping left and right through other people who are now hiring while they're in the bathroom? Just like a first date, potential employees are looking for red flags. But they're also looking for signs that it's safe to let their guard down a bit. You've got to be honest with yourself about your red flags and your green lights. So where does your organization lie? Is your culture clearly defined? I don't know about you, but the more a company uses the word culture in a sentence, the less I think they actually know what their culture actually is. And that's going to be a red flag for people. A green light, though, is transparency. Are employees regularly vouching for their friends and their family to apply? Are you open to allowing these prospects to talk with your employees about what it really is like to work there? Are you comfortable with where you stand as a leader for that conversation? Are your people going the extra mile to champion you, to champion your workplace? Do the leaders regularly engage with employees? And are they open about their mistakes when they make them? Are they open about the lessons that they've learned? Are they open to feedback and ideas from anywhere within the organization, regardless of job title? A red flag, managers who monologue. I worked with a client who was so proud of how they allowed their employees to pitch ideas at their all-hands meetings. So I attended one virtually, and I kid you not, the CCO pontificated for 20 minutes before asking for input. And the input was just everybody agreeing with him. The meeting was supposed to go an hour. Everybody signed off 34 minutes early. In a world where employees want their voices heard, Hamlet, it's a one-way ticket out the door. I know what you have to say is important, but what they have to say is even more important. And that's what people are looking for. Potential employees want to be heard first. Now, eventually, I got that same CCO to open meetings, including one that I was recently at in person, by giving the employees the floor to pitch ideas, ask questions, and offer feedback. Now, this environment just opened up the door to new discoveries, new conversations were happening, new action steps were being discovered, and people were excited about the next steps as they left the meetings. Another red flag, too, is when you do ask for feedback, follow up on it. Act on that feedback. A buddy of mine was given an anonymous survey at his work where one of the required fields was his job title. That seems fine, but he was the only one with that job title. So much for being anonymous, right? Long story short, he no longer works there because the many suggestions that he would have were often met with resistance from his leaders. So why even send out the survey in the first place? It's one thing not to listen, but it's another thing to ask for feedback and then not to listen. So when it does come to looking for feedback, as a leader, respond with curiosity. Creates a whole new conversation and relationship with your team. Leaders responding to unwanted information or feedback with curiosity and questions rather than judgment or acting in defense changes the outcome of the conversation because it changes the conversation. Lead with questions. Lead with clarifying questions to create real connections with your people. Speaking of questions, there is nothing more powerful than asking yourself questions when it comes to reframing your retention and your recruiting practices. Now, all of my training programs are centered around teaching managers to get really self-reflective through asking questions, and they end up making some really interesting and unexpected discoveries. This is kind of what comedians do. I mean, our job is to continually question what we see. We keep asking questions until we're met with an unexpected observation, and that triggers a laugh response. Because when we laugh, that's our brain's way of saying, I've never looked at it that way before. And when you laugh, the same part of your brain lights up as when you solve a problem. So when it comes to being in a leadership role, every day you need to be open to saying, I've never looked at it that way before. Be open to thinking that about something or someone that you've thought the same way about for years. Because HR gets a bad rap, and it's probably not your fault, but those preconceived notions of managers and HR are there in your employees until you interrupt your thinking patterns, accept new perspectives and possibilities, and create a stand-up culture where it's safe to take risks and keep questioning what you see, keep being open to unexpected observations, and keep being open to laughter. Now, I think it's so fascinating that we live in this society that when we meet someone new, within minutes, where does the conversation go? What do you do for a living? And then we build this story up here about who that person might be based on our experience of that job before we even give them a chance. Instead of talking about our passions and the things that really drive us and excite us as human beings, we're reciting a tired elevator pitch, and everyone's eyes are glazing over. I was actually at a party with my girlfriend's extended family, and so I'm meeting a lot of people for the first time. And one of her uncles, whom I've never met, asked that same question. What do you do for a living? And I responded by saying, I teach managers how to stop being and make work fun so that their teams actually want to be there. And he took a step back and then started sharing stories about managers that made him laugh. And it changed the whole dynamic of the conversation, and that's what we need to do. We need to break down those silos. So I'm going to leave you with 5 quick questions that you can ask yourself at a moment's notice to break down those internal monologues and create human connection with your people. The first question is to ask, what else could be true? Our employees aren't always going to perform up to standards, and there's often an underlying reason. Never base your relationship with an employee on what you see. Rather, get curious about why you're seeing it and ask that question. What else could be true? The second question, rather than trying to get someone to stay with your company or trying to get them to complete a task or get them to work for you, ask the question, how can I help them be better? This shifts your priority from getting outcomes to building their potential. Ask this of yourself every day. How am I helping them get better? How can I help them make their own discoveries instead of telling them what to do? Telling people what to do is a manipulation because built into that command is do this or else. And framing it as an open-ended question where their answer is an action, like how can you get XYZ? Or what would you have to do to solve this problem? Or how would you think differently about this if you could? It makes them feel like they're coming up with the idea. That's way more rewarding than telling them what to do because, well, what they do will feel like an obligation, and that's no fun. How can I set time aside to learn who they are? What are their talents? What are their passions? What are their concerns? What are their personal goals? Remember, you don't have time to not have time. Have weekly office hours where you don't talk about work at all, and you get curious about what they care about and who they really are. Now, it might seem counterproductive in the short term, but if they get offered a gig with a little bit higher pay after you've built a genuine connection, they'll be a little bit more hesitant to jump ship. How can I help them find a way to integrate their passion that I learned about into their work? I mean, who knows what you might discover? Maybe there's an employee that they don't know who cares about the same things. Maybe there's a service opportunity for your organization to participate in that would have them feeling like they're working towards something bigger than themselves. Make those connections through these conversations. Brainstorm together, brainstorm with your team, and you never know what you might discover. Because right now, out there somewhere, is a company similar to yours. in this same economy whose employees are reaching out to their friends and their families saying, man, you gotta come work here. I want to help you make your company that company. I want people to come to you and say, man, how'd you do it? How did you overcome these odds, this market, everything that's going on in the world? I want to help you get there. I want to help you make your workplace one where people want to be. Do you want to work somewhere you want to be? I assume so, because you're here listening to this today. Making change is all about creating a mental reframing. Instead of asking, should we? Ask, how can we? How can I look at this just a little bit differently? What is somebody else out there doing differently that I can discover and try and apply to my own organization and my own situation? And if it means letting them drink, well, I'm not going to stop you.